What would motivate you to care? And I don't know about you, but I wonder, like, what's going on? How does our culture enable this? How did this seed get planted and take root? And then we'll get into some academia called queer and gender theory, which is part of the foundation of what's going on. And we'll talk about gender dysphoria and social contagion. Then we'll talk about transgender activism. And one thing I hope you walk away with, or you're convinced of, is gender dysphoria is not the same as transgender. There are some word games being played here that are very, very important to distinguish. We'll try and tease them out. And then we'll do a Christian analysis and response and a summary. Okay, disclaimer. This is a serious conversation for mature adults. If you can be respectful and a mature adult, please stay. If you can't, please leave. Okay? Everybody staying? So why should you listen to me? Obviously, I mentioned the personal event that motivates me. I'm also trained in the hard science. I have a master's and PhD in engineering. I understand math and modeling. So if I read papers, I go to the papers. I don't let people interpret the data for me. And I'm taking I call it a cross-discipline approach rather than a single silo. I have experience in engineering, biology, and philosophy. The thing that really roots me, grounds me, is right now, I believe the strong should protect the weak from being exploited. That is the thing that I walked away from. And I hope your soul is functioning, that you too you're strong and you want to protect the weak from being exploited. So why should you care? Let me introduce you to Kiera Bell. And that's one of the papers I'm passing around here. The title is Kiera Bell, My Story. Now, to protect my voice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that on my left, front to back, actually no, let's do it this way. Front to back, starting in Austin, that you read the slides for me, right? So I don't have to wear out my voice. And it also keeps you engaged, because that way you know you're going to have to pay attention. So, Austin, could you read this, please?
Yeah, sure. After a series of superficial conversations with social workers, I was put on puberty blockers at age 16. A year later, I was receiving testosterone shots. When I was 20, I had a double mastectomy. By then, I appeared to have a more masculine build, as well as a man's voice, a man's beard, a man's name, Quincy, after Quincy Jones. I started realizing how many flaws there had been in my thought process, and how they had interacted with claims about gender that are increasingly found in the larger culture, and that have been adopted at the Tavistock. I remember my idea as a 14-year-old that hormones and surgery would turn me into someone who appeared to be a man. Now, I was that person. But I recognized that I was very physically different from men. Living as a trans man helped me acknowledge that I was still a woman. I also started to see what I was living out was based on stereotypes, that I was trying to assume a narrow identity of masculine guy. It was all making less and less sense. I was also concerned about the effect of my transition would have on my ability to find a sexual partner.
Kiera Bell, at 14, was confused and thought she was a man. What did she do? Took puberty blockers at 16, went on testosterone, and she had a double mastectomy. Now, the thing that really gets me is that middle part says, living as a trans man helped me to acknowledge that I was still a woman.
Then there was the fact that no one really knew the long-term effects of the treatment. For instance, the puberty blockers and testosterone caused me to have to deal with vaginal atrophy, the thinning and fragility of the vaginal walls that normally occur after menopause. I started feeling really bad about myself again. As the High Court found, much of the clinic's treatment is not even based on solid evidence. At the time our case was accepted, the NHS was asserting that the effects of puberty blockers are fully reversible, but recently the NHS reversed itself, acknowledging that little is known about the long-term side effects on a teenager's body or brain. That didn't stop them from prescribing these drugs to people like me. Quickly to improve my well-being, but after the court ruling, the Tavistock released an internal study of a group of 44 patients who had started taking puberty blockers at ages 12 to 15. It said that this treatment had failed to improve the mental state of patients, having no significant effect on their psychological function, thoughts of self-harm, or body image. Additionally, of those 44 patients, 43 went to cross-sex hormones. This suggests that blocking puberty isn't providing a pause, it's giving a push.
There's a little backdrop here. Kiara Bell sued the clinic, the Tavistock clinic, that pushed her through the system. And the court actually took the case, and she won. And the reason she won is because the judges did not see any evidence that the treatment would help. Now, it turns out that that case was appealed, and her case was lost because of really a technicality. And so what she's talking about here is, first of all, the first part of it is important because the reason you're supposed to go on puberty blockers and go all through this is that you're supposed to feel more like your authentic self. But what you read up there is she says, I started feeling really bad about myself again. She wound up in the same place she'd begun. In the middle part, the High Court, the judges, use their analysis to say the treatment is not even based on solid evidence. She went through this, and there really wasn't the evidence to prove that it would help her. And the last part is, it says that, well, there's two things there. One is this clinic had done a study to see whether it would actually provide any benefit. And they did not publish the study. Why do you think they didn't publish the study? Why? It didn't confirm the results they wanted. But after the court case, they were forced to publish it. And what it says here, this treatment had failed to improve the mental state of patients, having no significant effect on the psychological function, thoughts of self-harm, or body image. This poor woman disfigured her body, thinking it would help her, was told it would help her, it didn't. Why don't you somebody else called Prisha Mosley. That's her Twitter handle. This is her. You read the title, it says, detransitioned woman tells Texas lawmakers no parent has the right to mutilate and sterilize their child as state weighs ban on child sex treatment. This is the court. No, this is in front of the Texas Senate or House, whatever. That's her. Let's see what she has to say.
I can't believe this happened. I ruined my life. When you break it down, I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I had ever even experienced being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child. And now I feel like I will never entirely know. I want to say that I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity, and my doctors knew this. I told them, even though they didn't ask, that I had been diagnosed with BPD, and it was all fine to them. I wasn't happy as a girl, so that meant I was a boy, and I was trans, and so I I just took the cure that was handed to me. I was told that I was being given a cure, and I wouldn't want to kill myself anymore. And it wasn't true. I didn't want to cry in this video, but this is such a hard thing to talk about. I lost a lot of things to this, and I just hope that anyone else who's going through what I went through as a young girl will not be prescribed hormones and surgery because of other things. You know, there are so many mental health disorders that make you hate your body, and the solution isn't to change your body, it's to fix your brain, you know? I just don't want anyone else to ever feel this way. I lost my voice, I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to have kids. I feel like no one wants to date me or love me because I'm ruined.
Tough. That's your life. So why should we care? Because young people, your friends, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, are literally ruining their lives before they've even started living them. That's why we care. So, this information is for you to do something. So how has culture enabled this? We are in a culture war. And this is the quote from C.S. Lewis. He says, the Christian and the materialist, secularists, hold different beliefs or worldviews about the universe. They can't both be right. The one who is wrong will act in a way that simply doesn't fit the real universe. I would phrase that perhaps another way, which is the one that is wrong is going to have to fight a lot harder to get reality to conform to what they want. And so I'd say living in nature, or living in reality, nature is easier than living in a fantasy. And that's a theme I want to propose to you. This is a theme that you can talk to a non-Christian about. You know, if the way you believe about reality is wrong, you're going to notice it. It's going to be a lot harder for you to live. How many of you ever heard of Francis Schaeffer? Anybody tell me what he was, what he did? Not Forrest, somebody else. Somebody, please.
Christian apologist.
He was a Christian apologist, yeah. Do you know what he was famous for? He was famous for this analogy of a two-story house. The upper and lower story. And in the lower story are what he called facts. The secular culture views reality this way, in that you have the lower story, which are facts. They're public in that everybody sees the same facts. They're objective in that they're external to you. You can see them, touch them, feel them, measure them, and they're valid for everyone. It doesn't matter. It's not subjective. And there are philosophies like empiricism, rationalism, materialism, and naturalism. Those fall in that lower story. The upper story, we'll call them values. So we'll make this a little more concrete in a minute. But values, which are private, right? They're subjective, they're internal, they're personal. And because of that, they're relativistic. And you wind up with philosophies like idealism, Marxism, or existentialism that are up there. So culture views things in terms of the lower story and other things in terms of the upper story. If we're talking about philosophy, say modernism says the facts are the primary reality. This upper story, yeah, it may exist, but it doesn't impact reality. Now, however, The postmodernists say, no, 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 no. Values are the primary reality. Your facts are really interpreted by internally, so the facts you say are objective aren't really objective, they are subjective, and because the facts actually belong in the values category, in the upper story. Now this is probably pretty weird to you. Let's make this a little more concrete as an example. Science. How do you think that science deals with facts? Yeah, pretty much. I would say it's in the lower story. What about theology? Can you touch theology? No? Do people have different views of theology? Yeah. What about, this is our culture, not the Christian point of view, what about culture? What do they say about morality? Is morality, that's good for you but not for me? Morality is internal. Morality is subjective, it's private. So, do you see this? Right? And in some sense, there's a war going on in the secular world, but does science dominate or does postmodernism dominate? Do you ever do anything in this two-story manner? Do you slot things into one story or never? No? Okay. So we'll go back to the values and the facts. Now we're going to get into why we're talking about this. Your body is factual. I can see it. You can measure it. We can poke it. That's in the lower story, right? But in the upper story, we have your personhood, your real authentic self, right? That's internal to you. I can't see it. I can't touch it. I don't even know what it is, but you know what it is because you're the only person who has access to it. So it's in the upper story. Does that make sense? Right? You have your body is one thing, and your person is another thing. And in this case, they touch each other. Right? The body can inform your personhood. You can say, oh, I stubbed my toe and I'm angry. Or that person offended me and I want to go and hit them. Right? There's the notion of what I think, who I am, what I do. That's internal to me. But my body, that's outside of me. Now, what happens is that with gender and queer theory, the body and the person are separated, and they don't interact. That is why a person who's born male can say, my authentic self is I am a female. That's because he's saying, my body does not inform who I am as a person. I believe I am the other sex. My personhood, my gender is the other sex. So this is how we've gotten here. There's been a progression, right? Francis Schaeffer brought this up in the 1950s, and this is the outcome. So there's now a separation between personhood or gender and body. Does that make sense? Okay. So this has consequences. Who's next?
Dualism upper and lower story dualism, consequences. Dualism creates a fractured, fragmented view of the human being. It's neither scientific or empirical. The body is treated as separate from the authentic self. The physical is separate from the person. It creates bizarre ideas like a human non-person. A baby is human but needs cognitive function to be considered a person. Gender is completely independent of the body, and the body provides no guidance as to how our personhood should be structured. And once personhood is detached from biology, there's no objective way to draw the line.
I always wondered how somebody who was fairly moral, pretty good ethics, could think abortion was the right thing to do. This is why. Because they say, yes, that is a human baby. But that human baby isn't really a person. Because to be a person, you have to be able to think, reason, interact with the external world. Well, they can do that. You have to be able to think. You have to have a personality. But that human baby in the womb doesn't have a personality. Therefore, it is not a person. Therefore, you are not killing a person when you murder the baby. Does that make sense? This is how that dualism has worked itself out in our culture. People believe this. Yes?
And I was going to say, it creates like complex issues of like, for example, a person who's like mentally disabled, since they don't have the same, I guess, cognitive function, there's like,
Right.
it's okay to kill them.
Right.
Basically.
Absolutely. And here's an even more sinister one. When you're thinking, are you sleeping? So I could kill you in your sleep based on this definition. Right? But there's this inability to take it to its logical conclusion or to see these things outside of the context. Right? There's a rationalization that's going on here. Okay. Any other comments on what we've gone through? Yes.
How does this play into the fact that like before puberty and even before the age of like 25, your brain isn't fully developed? You're like not solidly thinking until you're that age. Like, does that play any? I mean, clearly it doesn't because they're doing surgeries on.
There's an arbitrary distinction they have that, you know, maybe once you can say gaga, you're actually
Okay.
none of that, right? I don't know how they justify, right? There's some arbitrary decision they make, some line. Anything? Yes.
On the subject of being able to kill people who are mentally disabled or comatose or whatever, I don't remember what aspects it refers to, but there's a part of the Canadian criminal code that now allows that. So people will be able to, I think they call it physician-assisted suicide or something
Yeah,
like that.
Canada has gone full euthanasia.
Yeah.
They're telling homeless people, you know, you might be better dead. Let us help you, right? I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
They just had
You can read newspaper articles on this if you go and look. I'm sorry, Julie.
they had an ad campaign for that actually with a woman who I think she had some kind of stage 4
Yeah.
cancer or something, and it was talking. The whole ad was her saying like, "This gives me a choice and lets me go out on my own terms" and stuff like that. But it came out later that she had actually not wanted to go through with that. But you know,
I understand.
maybe to them
I'm
it's
originally
not
Canadian, so this deeply saddens me. It really does. Okay. So, well, we're going to clump together queer and gender theory because I don't see much of a difference. I want to start, though, in a different spot, please. By the way, can you say your name before you read the slide just so we can get to know you?
I'm John Carl. Alright, so a warning from the history of academic thought. Cranioscopy or phrenology.
Just read it out loud. You're going to say it wrong anyway, so just be bold about it.
Alright, phrenology and cranioscopy use measurements of the contour of the skull to predict personality traits. Phrenological thinking was influential in the psychiatry and psychology of the 19th century. During the early 20th century, it was used to affirm European superiority over other races, allowing the ranking of races from least to most to follow. Craniology divided humanity into hierarchized races, spanning from the Aryan white race and the
Just be bold, man.
I can't pronounce that. To the brachycephalic and the mediocre in their inert race, leading inspiration of the Nazi anti-Semitism and the Nazi ideology. Phrenology and craniology were academic approaches that were used to justify eugenics, social engineering of the worst kind.
So we usually approach academia thinking it's this institution of knowledge and it's unbiased. And it's somewhat pure. I'm doing this to point out to you that we have to consider a possibility. I'm not saying this is true, but you have to consider the possibility that academic thought, academic disciplines, can be used for social engineering. And there's a couple of words in that second one that you should recognize. Right? Nazi. This academic discipline led to what the Nazis did. So we have to be cautious. You have to be aware that academic disciplines can be abused. Not that they all are, I'm just saying. Okay. Next, please.
Elizabeth. Queer and gender theory. Theory theorizes that we have a gender identity which is independent of our biological sex. We may feel our gender identity is male, female, neither, or something else. Focuses on emphasizing mismatches between sex, gender, behavior, gender expression, and desire attraction. Queer and gender theory is an apologetic to explain gender dysphoria and other types of sexual abnormalities. Seeks to delegitimize natural body functions and only heterosexual union for children. Queer and gender theory is biased and its originators say so. Academics who seek to legitimize their abortion, abnormal, non-natural sexual, not trying to objectify objective research, but goal is to break any links that connect biological sex to gender, desire, and behavior. Uses academic sounding language with unverifiable definitions and distinctions.
So I'm being pretty harsh here. But I'm not being harsh because I'm making it up. So let's start at the top, right? If queer and gender theory is a theory that you have a gender identity, upper story, that's different than your biological basis, the lower story. And this is why we have these various definitions that people go by in terms of pronouns. If you look at it, I'll call it strategy it uses is to say, oh, we'll see in the next slide that sex, gender, your behavior and your desires, they're all very different and unconnected. And you have to wonder, why would somebody come up with this? Why would you create this academic discipline? What would motivate somebody to do this? Well, you want to explain things like gender dysphoria. But if you go and look at the people who originated this, who founded it and kept it going, they had abnormal sexual inclinations. And I would say it's possible that they wanted a theory that would legitimize those abnormal sexual inclinations. Why do I say that? Because they admitted they had abnormal sexual inclinations. Right? That's why I would say, so because of this, you have the abnormal versus the normal. They want to delegitimize what is normal. Normal being man and woman come together, they create a child, and that's a normal thing. They want to delegitimize that so that they can say what they're doing is normal. Does that make sense? That's why I call it an apologetic. It's an apologetic for how they want to behave. They are not seeking to do objective research, and they state this. Right? Normally you expect academics to do objective research. That is not this goal. What does that say over the corner? What is it like, people? Say it loud. Gingerbread man. We've gone from gingerbread man to genderbread person. Kindergartners and grade 1ers are seeing this. What you're going to hear, K through 3 are taught. Now, I don't know about you, but my brain wasn't well formed at that age to comprehend this stuff. So would we expect this will confuse them? Absolutely. So what is this queer and gender theory? Well, we see that funny symbol with sex, right? And sex has to do with the body, lower story. We have a gender identity, and it says in the brain, has to do with your sense of self. who you, in your head, feel yourself to be. It's an upper story. Gender expression is how you present yourself to others. It has to do with clothing, behavior, actions, and ways of speaking. Story. And then attraction. This has to do with who you are romantically or physically attracted to. Again, upper story. Okay. Any questions? Because we're about to huddle together. Any questions about this? Yes?
Why would you teach this to K through 3rd grade? That makes no sense. What business do they have learning this?
That is one of the most important questions in our culture today. I have my own ideas. I'll speak to you in private if you want. But that is a core question, yes. Anybody else? Okay. So let's break into groups 3 or 4. So there's 3 questions. These 2 rows take the first question. These 2 rows take the second. This last one takes the third. Okay? Huddle together, you've got 3 minutes.
Alright, well, is there a natural order or purpose for the items they should follow?
Hey Curtis,
Yeah.
can you rephrase the second question?
Okay, so maybe I should explain what the questions mean, right?
That might help you, right?
Okay, so these items are all treated as if they're not connected. They're completely independent. So the question is that true? Or are they really all unified together? And we've just labeled sort of, things that are on the same thing. Can you treat your attraction different from your gender identity completely? Or do they interact? That's the first question. Does that make sense? First question, okay. Second question, is there a natural order or purpose for these items that they should follow? If I look at nature, nature shows us purpose in things. Is there some purpose to sex? Is there some purpose to gender identity? Is there some purpose to gender expression? Is there some purpose to attraction? That nature shows us we should follow, right? It's not just, I choose to do this. Is there something that if reality is a particular way, I should go that way because it is the best way for me to go, right? Is there a natural order or purpose for these things? And can the bottom 3 items be separated from your body? That's the third, that should be self-evident, okay? Is that good? More clarification needed? Okay, I will restart the clock.
I would say that's true for the first one. The second one, you can't actually do that. Remember, like expression of these expressing, you can't actually do expression. And then attraction, whether it's natural is one question, but
I see the expression of attraction is more, in my opinion, especially with the expression, you see people trying to act or express on the opposite gender. It's always like a veil orientation.
Gender
Right.
gender and but gender identity, I don't think should be something like bloom personality
Trying to play on the stereotypes of
you're doing
I feel like it's just playing on the facade because you're just denying yourself. In your mind, you're just denying reality. You can't know what to do with that. And I think the same thing is true with attraction. That's just my experience with space.
express
Way,
themselves.
way,
That's
way
so
more
much
difficult.
better. But
Right.
who are
Men.
men?
That's your body. That's your body.
All these different aspects. There's no way right
Not like necessarily definitely not clear sex is I definitely it's hard to understand. Yeah. Well, I think
Because the other one, well, that's not real. That's higher level action. I feel like, especially in the same sex, it always, it seems at least to explain
if there's a problem with your but if there's like a problem with your we would also call that organized. And then like I think it's over time. So I just
Okay. So, we start on the left side. Tell us what you guys are thinking. No right or wrong answers. Just wonder what you guys came up with.
My thing was just that I don't think that they should be treated separately. I think that they're all intertwined, but in different ways. Part of me says that I don't even think gender identity and gender expression should be considered as different than regular identity and different than regular expression, because as it is now, the gender has been, when gender is separated from sex, there is quite literally no definition to what gender is, aside than personality. Because there is no way to be, there is no personality traits that all men have and that all women have. So in order to say, I identify as a man, well, what does that mean? Because men have different personality traits, different expression all across the board. So unless it's tied to something physical, there's no way for it to even be like, it just moves,
Yep.
it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think you're qualified now to come up and do the rest of the lecture. That was a great answer. Good job. Guys at the back.
We pretty much agreed with that. We also said that at the
Louder,
very-
please. Louder.
Oh, sorry. Pretty much agreed with what she said, but also at the very least, attraction is maybe an extension of gender expression, but there's no way that those two things are separated. And we also pointed out that on that chart, it says attraction comes from the heart, but nothing actually comes from your heart. It's still from your brain, and I think that was intentional to try and separate the two things. But
That's a good
they're
point. I thought
actually
it, yeah.
linked.
Yeah. So how? Yeah. Okay. Good answer. Middle to Rose.
We talked about how like all of those things are like, you know, given to us like from a biological point. Like the goal is to create more children, and like, you know, a peacock, right? Their expression is their feathers, and that's how they procreate and make more peacocks. And so like all of these things are tied to this idea of like having more children and
So there's a natural purpose in all of these four things. The purpose is to continue the species in some way, right?
Right. I would point out though, just from what I know about history, like birth control was invented in the 60s or so. And it's interesting to see that like the consequences of these things, which is children, has kind of been erased. And so you're free to live as a man if you're a woman, because you're not actually going to have the consequences of having a child by expressing yourself. And you know what I mean? Like, if that makes sense.
This is a very narcissistic viewpoint, right? They don't even talk about children. So, good answer at the back.
Okay. Yeah, we
kind of be like sort of in agreement with the first group said. And I think that expression and attraction should kind of be a result of your sex. It should come from that, and so it should like kind of like, and I guess in a sense, come after that, but as a result of the sex you are. If that makes sense. Yeah.
So if we want to procreate, men should be attracted to women, women should be attracted to men, right?
Right.
And also, for the whole natural order of things, it just seems like there's a very high percentage of people where all these things actually are grouped together. You know, so it's like men cross-culturally, like people who are men have, you know, they all identify as men, not all, but 99.9% of them identify as men, they're attracted to women, and they also express themselves as men. And you have to ask, well, what is it that unites all of these men across all these cultures, across all these time periods? And it's that it's their nature.
Yes.
Right? There's nothing else that you can possibly point at that unites them other than, well, it's their nature. So
I think we all agree that there is a natural order of things, that these things have a purpose for and should follow. Cool. Last question over here.
We're still talking about this. This is an interesting question for how simple it is, but I would kind of put forward that generally, as Forrest was just saying, there is a nature to it, and by nature they're all kind of combined into one thing. That being so, it's just asking, can you separate them? Like I would maybe say, you can technically separate expression and attraction, at least, you know, on the outer level, but then it kind of wraps into, is that a natural thing or not? So.
Yeah. So one of the things I didn't hear, or maybe I missed, is I expected you to say sex and attraction are linked together. There's just no doubt about that, right? If you want to have children, well, the sex and attraction has to work together.
Yeah. Okay. So you mean sex just like
male and
procreation,
female.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but then that kind of brings up like, you know, there's fetishes or whatever that people are attracted to weird things, right?
Yeah, there's all sorts of abnormalities
there are
in
ways
nature too, right? But
yeah, I mean, but that is part of the question. Like, can you separate it from reality? You know, in the fringe cases, yes, but generally, no, maybe.
I mean, this is an instance where the exception proves the norm. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You have a question over here?
Oh, I kind of just wanted to ask your opinion on something, or just.
Okay, we can give it a try.
But in terms of like attraction, I definitely think it is linked to sex. But do you think that there is a part of attraction that is nurture versus nature? Like, do you think that it's combined, or do you think it's all nature?
Oh no, it's combined, right? Because you can, if you're growing a plant and every time you walk by the plant, you kick it, the plant's going to grow lopsided, right? So if you put somebody in an environment that is dysfunctional, you're going to produce dysfunction normally, right? That make sense? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Okay, we'll move on. So I looked at this and I did a lot of listening, and I wonder, is there really anything new here? What I mean by that is if I replace those words with the word personality, to your point, right? Personally has to do with your sense of self, who you are in your head, how you feel to yourself. Is that true? Mm-hmm. That's true, right? Personality is how you present yourself to others. It has to do with your clothing, behavior, actions, and speaking. Is that true? I think so. Now, personality is to do with who you are romantically or physically attracted to. I think that's true too, right? So, what's new here? And we don't have to, I'll answer this because I want to get to something else here, but if this is all part of your personality, then isn't it really just psychology? And we don't need gender theory, genderqueer theory? Psychology should be dealing with this in its totality. And is this just a narrow slice of psychology? And because it's narrow, you don't treat the whole person. So I sort of question the utility or usefulness of the entire endeavor. Just to your point. The claims of queer and gender theory. Binary is bad. Male and female, right? Okay. Where we leave off? Over here, please. Name, rank, serial number.
Kennedy. The claims of queer and gender theory. Non-binary is literally a hybrid man-woman that can both become pregnant and make women pregnant. No culture except ours recognize that men can become pregnant. queer and gender definitions show this is nonsensical. Lesbians are women attracted to women. Gays are men attracted to men. They aren't. It's attracted to it. So, trans people want to live as the other sex of the two sexes.
There's a lot of inconsistencies in this that are just so obvious, right? The first one is you say, well, if you can't have binary, then you must have non-binary. But non-binary means not you have two things, you have one thing. And if you have one thing, then that thing needs to have the traits of male and female, which means it can get a woman pregnant, it can get something else pregnant, and it can itself become pregnant. The term is nonsensical. This is the start. And the other is, if you look at the LGBTQ whatever, lesbians are not men attracted to women. Lesbians are women attracted to women. And to define a woman, there has to be a binary. And gays are men attracted to men. And if there are men, then there are men and women, so there is a binary. Make sense? And the other thing is trans people want to live as the other sex of the two sexes, right? So their actions prove there is a binary. Oh, what did I do? Okay, here's the next one. Next one.
Joseph, gender is a spectrum. No scientific or empirical evidence for this. It's self-contradictory and nonsensical statement when done in practice. Facebook had 71 options.
Right. So they say that gender is a spectrum. What does that mean? It means if it's a spectrum, it means you have man and woman, so you already have knocked off plane one. But they say there's a range in between. What is that? And then you wind up growing all of these various terms. Next, please. Oh, you have a question?
I just want to say with the spectrum, like with the Facebook options and like and those sort of things, they say it's a spectrum and you can freely express yourself as it is, but when those companies sort of put all their options out, they still have a finite number.
Right.
So you can't go in and, the old joke, the attack helicopter, I identify as an attack helicopter. You can't go and put that on your Facebook profile. You have like a list of, their pronouns.
So you already have a predefined list. It's not an infinite spectrum. It's
sure.
Predefined.
Also, point one, I've heard it said that if someone claims that they're non-binary, that means they acknowledge you can either be non-binary or binary, which is another binary by itself.
Okay.
Well, what is the spectrum of? Because, social constructs don't make a man or a woman, and body parts don't make a man or a woman. What is the spectrum of?
Yeah, that's the
Humans.
That's the inconsistencies, right? That is the inconsistencies. I think we're Julie.
I was going to say, I always got confused. Your spectrum doesn't quite match how I would define a spectrum as an engineer in the scientific field.
Right.
I would expect it to be 100% male, 100% female. So you're 70% one, 30% the other. But they just put arbitrary.
This is more like a plane.
Yeah.
It's not a line with two ends. It's a plane, and you randomly select where you are on that plane.
Right.
And you get to define the plane, by the way.
Right. The ends aren't tied together, and
Right.
you're on it. It's completely.
Oh, it's like putting the heart for children. This is like putting the engineering terms for the education.
Okay, next please.
Okay, I'm Meredith. Boy/girl and man/woman are just social constructs. Sexual differentiation is a biological reality, not just a social construct. A man and woman can create a baby is not a social construct. True that men and women act differently in different cultures, but different cultures still recognize male and female. Not the same as claiming these are social constructs, which is fantastical exaggeration.
Yeah, a little bit of my own editorial there. I read this and I just wonder. So what this is talking about, if everything is in the upper story in the mind, then everything is just a construct of the mind, and more than a mind is a society, so then everything is a social construct, right? That's where these people are living in terms of their philosophy. Obviously, man and woman are a biological construct. Now, if you're talking about the upper story, is that a social construct? And one of the rebuttals they have is that, well, there are some cultures that men act like they have the duties of women, and women have the duties of men. And that may be true, but there's still men and women, right? That's part of the behavior. Next, please.
We all have a gender identity that is independent from your biological sex. If a man has a woman feeling, then doesn't this make him a feminine man and not a woman? What is a female feeling if female is a social construct? Cannot define a woman if a man can become a woman. Without justification, turns a real thing into a subjective thing.
Right. So they say that there is, if a man has a feminine feeling, and like you said, right, men are in a spectrum. What is a feminine feeling? I don't know. But if I had a feminine feeling, I would still be a man, but I would be a feminine man. Right? We have words for that. Sissy. Right? Alternatively, for a girl that acts like a boy, we have a word for that. Tomboy. But in this framework, a tomboy is actually a girl who is wants to be a trans man, and a sissy is a man who wants to be a trans woman. Yes?
Essentially, with the creation of, like, anyone can be anything, while trying to get away from gender stereotypes, it really just doubles down on them.
Exactly. That is the critique that people say, is that, and if you remember Kira Bell, she talked about stereotypes. She was living a stereotype. And that's what this is about. It eliminates stereotypes. Okay. I'm going to keep you about 10 or 15 minutes late, okay? Okay. Where do we leave off?
To be completely honest, I didn't wear my glasses today. So
Okay, that's being perfectly honest, then we will go back here.
Queer and gender theory assumptions. The biological male-female distinction is not hardwired into nature, a fantastic claim that is against all of history. That human beings can be broken into disconnected parts and the parts are independent of each other. The body gives no reference points for our gender identity or our moral choices. Biology and personhood are separate. Your body is not part of your identity or authentic self. Our identity is defined by our feelings and desires. That biological or gender-related facts cannot be trusted and must be ignored. The claim is these facts are really interpreted and conditioned by culture and history. But if facts cannot be known, then how can all facts are interpreted and conditioned by culture, be itself known to be true? It is self-contradictory and defeats itself. We have no access to what the body objectively is.
Right. That third one, I think, is really important. The claim is biological facts are really interpreted and conditioned by culture and history. Right. So that itself is a fact, right? So if you apply that rule to itself, does it pass the test? No, it defeats itself. This is self-contradictory at its core. Okay. Hopefully this is going to make you angry. Because if it doesn't make you angry, you have to go and check your pulse. I'm serious. Where we leave off? Forrest.
The failed experiment of Dr. John Money. Dr. John Money was the co-founder of the Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic. This is the first clinic to perform gender reassignment surgeries on children and adults. Proposed that a person's biology is completely separate from their feeling of whether they are male or female. Dr. Money wanted to test his idea that gender is about socialization and not biology. In the 1960s, he claimed the theory was proven because a man had successfully become a woman. The experiment started when a boy's, Bruce Raymer, circumcision had gone wrong at 8 months old. Dr. Money advised Bruce's parents to surgically change the boy into a little girl. Bruce was castrated, and doctors constructed an elementary female genitalia for the boy. Dr. Money told the parents to change Bruce's name and raise him like a girl, put him in girl's clothing, tell everyone that he is a girl, and never let him know the truth about his birth. If the boy could turn into a woman, while his twin brother Brian was a man, it vindicates the theory.
So it's pretty gross, but this actually happened. This psychologist had the theory that gender is a mind construct. And this boy who had the unfortunate accident was surgically turned into a girl. He had a twin brother. And so if the boy who was surgically turned into a girl behaved and lived as a woman, then that would mean gender is a social, your identity, your sexual identity, is a social construct. So what happened, right? What do you think? Yes?
I was wondering if Brian and Bruce are identical twins or fraternal twins. Not sure how much it matters.
I don't know.
Okay.
What do you think happened? Speak it up.
Did Bruce commit suicide?
It went poorly.
Okay, we'll go to it. Who's next?
Our rows are messed up.
You're next.
My name is Aiden. The failed experiment of Dr. John Money. Dr. John Money was an advocate of decriminalizing sex with children. He supported pedophilia. During sessions, Dr. John Money sexually abused Brenda and the brother Brian. Brenda was reportedly never happy as a girl and had masculine inclinations. Brenda found out what happened and chose to revert to living as a male and took the name David. Both brothers committed suicide in their 30s.
Makes me angry. This guy was a pedophile. Remember what I said about the point of the theory was to justify their behavior? There are others like him. Summary. The boy was castrated, renamed, told he was a girl, and raised as a girl. The boy rejected being raised as a girl and reverted to being a male. These results refute queer and gender theory. What happened was he promoted success, but it took years before the truth got out. And by that time, enough momentum had been built that it continued. Yes.
Was there ever justice for this doctor and the parents for doing this thing to these children?
I don't think so. That is the most surprising part of this, right?
So I guess so we know that he sexually abused them as children.
Yep.
Right? Would that be enough to take some kind of legal action?
Well,
or I guess does it depend on how we?
What happened was the boys refused to go see him again. So I don't think they uncovered the reason why until much later. Yes.
Do you know if that's like a common theme? Because I feel like in the research that I've done with doctors of, specifically male doctors of gender, like the pioneers of gender theory, they are, like, a lot of them
Are pedophiles.
Like, a lot of them.
Yes, I agree. That's why I said this theory is intended to be an apologetic for why they are the way they are and treat their behavior as normal. Yes? Yes.
There's another one I know of, but if you have a slide on it, I don't want to take away from it. If you have
No,
anything
I'm going to actually skip to other things right now, so I'm running out of time here and I don't want to keep you too late. So this is from the Daily Wire. No biological evidence for gender identity exists, the group of scientists, researchers say. Where are we? Please.
100 clinicians and researchers
There is certainly no biological evidence for gender identity and no laboratory test that can distinguish a trans-identified person from a non-trans identified person. Despite this, the belief in gender identity is used as the basis for medically transitioning thousands of children and adolescents. The assumption of the core biological underpinning for gender identity and gender dysphoria remains an unproven theory. While biology likely plays a role in gender nonconformity, currently there is no brain, blood, or other objective test that distinguishes a trans-identified from a non-trans identified person. Once confounding factors such as sexual orientation are controlled for, emphasis original, said the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine in an article debunking false and unproven assumptions used to medically transition children.
So, just so you know, I don't trust any literature coming out of this, or any interpretation literature. Go to the source, go to the articles, read them, and make your own judgment. Yes?
Just to offer a little bit of pushback. If it was truly let's say a mental disorder, then there wouldn't really be any brain, blood, or other objective test that you could use to distinguish it, just because we don't know that much about the brain.
Correct.
Right?
Well,
so I mean, if it was bipolar disorder or something, or ADHD.
You could do an MRI, I think, of a bipolar disorder person, and you would register a particular
ADHD
thing.
then, or something. It's very hard to
quantify
something.
Just to give a little more background here, there are people that say that this is a male brain in a female body, or a female brain in a male body, that's why this is happening, or there's some sort of genetic component to this, and this particular group of people are pushing back on it. That's where they're coming from. So I'm sorry, did you have a question?
I was just wondering if by that it was interpreting it as there's no test that distinguishes a person. I thought it was talking about in death. So if you didn't know the person, would you be able to tell if they were trans or if they weren't trans?
I think that's what they're talking about. Okay. Now we get into some interesting things here. The bizarre side effects of queer and gender theory. Next, please.
Bizarre side effects of queer and gender theory. Courts deliver the first blow against Biden's egregious embrace of gender ideology. Likewise, Dr. James Hurley recognizes that some biological men may identify as women and vice versa, but also understands that biology is fundamental in the practice of medicine and cannot be ignored. In one case, for example, Hurley diagnosed a biological male patient with prostate cancer, but the patient refused to accept Dr. Hurley's diagnosis because he identified as a woman and insisted that he did not have a prostate. Under Biden's mandate, Hurley would have been forced to acquiesce to the patient's demands, even if those demands put the patient's life at risk.
Biological man identifies as a woman, has prostate cancer, but says he can't have prostate cancer because he's a woman. Is that a bizarre side effect? Yes.
But that means he's trying to make a link between his identity and the body.
No, he's not. He's saying I'm completely separate. My identity is a woman. I can't have a prostate.
I think he means that men have prostates.
Yes.
And that there's that link there to the body and.
Well, no, so the doctor,
but
the thing is, a doctor and a patient, right? The doctor is trying to tell the patient, you have prostate cancer.
Right.
The patient says, I can't have prostate cancer because I'm a woman.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because the guy's saying he couldn't have a prostate because women don't have prostates, which is referring to women in the bodily sense instead of the identity sense. So it's just mind-numbing.
Okay, this is bizarre. We're in bizarre land. There's another one. USA Today again picks biological man as Woman of the Year. USA has picked a trans-identified male as its Woman of the Year for a second time running. And this time it's someone who advocates for child sex changes. Yep. Next, please. I think we're Julie.
Gosh, they even beat us at being women.
Can you read it from there?
Yeah. All right, transgender prisoner who sexually assaulted inmates jailed for life. Karen White, 52, admitted sexually assaulting women in female prison, raping 2 other women outside of prison. A predatory and controlling rapist has been jailed for life after she attacked vulnerable women in female prisons. Karen White, 52, who is described as being a danger to women and children, admitted sexually assaulting women in a female prison and raping another 2 women outside jail. The 52-year-old who is currently transitioning was sentenced yesterday for 2 counts of rape, 2 sexual assaults, and 1 offense of wounding.
So this happened in England, that's why it says The Guardian, right? The UK. But now you read this, you're kind of left scratching your head, like, what is going on here? You have this Karen White, obviously a woman, who raped other women in a women's prison, and she's described as being a danger to women and children. She sexually assaulted women in a female prison. It doesn't make sense until you read who's currently transitioning. So this was a biological male who claimed they were a woman and put in a woman's prison. Now you think that just doesn't make sense. And guess what? They did it in the U.S. Transgender Rikers inmate sentenced to 7 years for raping female prisoner. Next.
I'm Sarah. A transgender Rikers inmate raped a female prisoner while in the women's section of the jail and has been sentenced to 7 years, officials said Monday. Romeo Blunt, 33, who goes by Diamond Blunt, pleaded guilty to attempted rape April 7th in an apparent plea deal. Investigators said Blunt, who was housed in the female section of the facility, approached a 33-year-old female inmate in the bathroom at the Rose M. Senior Center February 8, 2021, after the victim had just finished showering. Blunt held the victim down by the back of her neck and raped her, investigators said. The victim reported the incident to jail officials, and the rape kit was administered, which matched Blunt's DNA in the New York State Registry.
Yes.
How was that attempted rape?
They plea deal. It was a plea deal down from rape to attempted rape. Now, question. What's a rape kit for? What are you actually getting with the rape kit? Semen. So this was obviously not a woman-on-woman rape. This was a man-on-woman rape in a women's prison. This is bizarre. And obviously he was much bigger than her. Obviously he was, obviously it could be expected he could overpower a woman. Some more bizarre side effects. Women could not be defined, so they could no longer be legally protected as a class. All that work for women's equality, gone. Yes?
I'm surprised you didn't cover the case of men crushing women's skulls in MMA.
Send me the link. But you women, you understand. All the work your grandmothers and mothers did is blown up. You are no longer a legally protected class because you can't be defined. The one I'm fearful about is the family can no longer be defined legally as a mother, a father, a son, or daughter by the state. Because you can't define father or mother. Parent 1, parent 2, son or daughter. And it's a slippery slope. This is where things get really, this is what we're looking forward to. In 2017, Rachel Dolezal, a white American woman, was found to be wrongly claiming to be black. If we can choose our gender, why not our race? I had to confirm it. There you go. Former NAACP leader agrees to plea deal on welfare fraud charges. Okay. Next, please. Yes.
I'm Julian. A former NAACP leader in Washington State who was exposed in 2015 as a white woman pretending to be black has reached an agreement to avoid trial on charges of welfare fraud. Diallo was born to white parents and grew up near Troy, Montana. She said she has began to change her perspective on race as a teenager after her religious parents adopted 4 black children. She decided to become publicly black years later after a divorce. The ruse worked for years, but in 2015, her parents, with whom she had long feuded, told reporters that their daughter is white and was presenting herself as a black activist in the Spokane region. She was eventually fired as head of the Spokane chapter of the NAACP and kicked off a police ombudsman commission. She also lost her job teaching African studies at the Eastern Washington University.
So, what does NAACP stand for? Do we know? Please.
It's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
Correct. National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. You had a white person claiming to be black, dressing as if they were black, leading the NAACP, okay? Farcical. But then she also was teaching African studies. And I'm sure she was associated with them, yes.
There's an initiative, or maybe a law, I guess, in San Francisco that they're trying to put in that would just give every black person $5 million.
Segregation, yeah.
And under certain circumstances within that law, she would be able to qualify, which is hilarious.
Yep, okay. That's the next one. Is in 2018, a 69-year-old Dutchman went to court to claim the right to self-identify as a 49-year-old. So if you can choose our gender, why can't we choose our age? Again, I need to validate this. There he is. He says he looks 20 years younger. I'm not kidding.
No.
So he wants his age changed. He wants to shift his birthday from 1949 to 1969, comparing the change to what? Identifying as being transgender. We live in a time when you can change your name and change your gender. Why can't I decide my own age? He said. Yes.
So based on this quote, was he like actually doing this, or was he just doing this to like frame the insanity of transgender?
No, he was doing this.
He was genuinely.
He was genuinely doing this.
Okay.
He is some sort of motivational speaker or trainer, and he felt that if people knew he was 69, he wouldn't get any business. That's why he was doing this. Yes.
I heard another story of a guy who was married with kids and then decided to do the whole transgender thing, but he identified as a 6-year-old girl.
Okay. So we are in bizarre land. So I'm going back here. The warning from the history of academic thought. This is the last one tonight. In what ways is gender and queer theory like or not like phrenology or craniology? Last one for the night. Pair together. I'll give you 3 minutes.
Well, clearly it's a That's
That line's already crossed.
Look at the head shapes. I would also say they were using the way that they take on the face value scientific methods and things that may have a standard. Some people have different solutions, and then they try to ascertain meaning to that doesn't necessarily exist. And it definitely seems like, just like these two movements, these movements are just a push right to, rather they exist in just the background reasons. And the same way gender queer theory just exists to kind of create a reason for people to support it. That's how I would put it. It's creating your it's about finding science that
I agree. Definitely. Like you said, having the same not really.
Okay.
What do you feel? Yeah.
Okay. Let's start on this side going that way. And by the way, I just thought it was an interesting question, so I'm really curious what you guys came up with.
I would say the most obvious way that it's like phrenology and craniology is that it's like utterly stupid.
Let's be a little more specific.
On the face value, both of these theories seem to take some sort of science that can be at some level potentially empirically backed, and then they try to ascertain all this meaning to that doesn't necessarily exist. And then more importantly, both of these ideologies, or rather these theories, only exist to give some sort of credence to an ideology that already existed before the evidence could be created, because essentially that's what happened. The evidence was forged, really, to back up these theories.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I'm not sure I can say that these disciplines were forged to support, racism, basically. But I would say that people who are racist were more easily swayed by them.
Of course.
And they supported them. Good answer.
It's a lot of confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias, I like that. At the back, please.
So, I may have missed something, but it seems to me like queer gender theory is almost like a step back from the phrenology and craniology, because at least for craniology, they had something they were actually measuring. And let's assume that evolutionary theory is true for a second. At least then they're like, okay, well, if that's true, then you have all these different humans evolving slowly over time. Then different pockets in different places would be more or less evolved than others. And so, there should be some physical difference between them. Yep. And so, hey, look, the skulls are slightly different. So maybe that's what it is, and that's how we can tell. That at least sounds plausible on the face of it, right?
Okay.
But for the queer and gender theory, there's nothing to measure. So it's like you just kind of, and it's all upper story stuff, as Chris Schaefer said.
That's a difference, right? There's a major difference that you say is the biggest thing. Okay, fair enough. We're gonna have to go through here, and then we can get to you, Julian. Okay. At the front here in the middle.
So I'd say it's pretty similar in the fact that it's gender and queer theory is being used like a tool or a rationalization to allow people to commit crimes, basically, like at least at an alarmingly high rate. That it's being used as some sort of rationalization to let these people go out and kind of create victims. I wouldn't say like I wouldn't say all transgender are doing this with that intent, but it just seems like it's a tool that can be easily used.
Easily abused, okay, fair enough. At the back? Anybody there?
One thing that we were talking about was how it's taking these measurable values or observations and treating them as causation or correlation to unrelated results in order to further this justification.
Yep. That's true. Correlation is not causation. Anybody here?
I guess it's very similar in the sense that game queer theory or gender and queer theory basically is kind of like itemizing people in a sense. Like queer, it's like I'm binary, I'm a man, I'm a female, I'm gay, I'm lesbian. Where it's like you have craniology, they do the same thing. It's like race, where it's like white, black, Jew, German, or they have Aryan. So like in their instance, they're saying the whiter you were, or the bigger your head size, or the smarter you were, the better you were, and then scale it down.
So they're creating categories and they're finding ways to map people in categories. That's true. Okay. You guys have been great sports. Next week, gender dysphoria and social contagion. I'm going to hang out here if you have questions, because this is a fairly controversial topic. If you think I've misrepresented something, or said something offensive, do not go out there and file a complaint. Come and talk to me here. Okay? Thank you.